Okay, so I thought we'd touch on perfectionism in this video. The word perfectionist really kind of gets thrown out a lot. At least I know I use it a lot in counseling sessions. And part of that's because perfectionism shows up in a lot of different ways. So you can kind of, and also the other thing is perfectionism is hard because different aspects of perfectionism really get reinforced earlier in life. And so, by the time someone's maybe older or an adult and it's not paying off quite as well, there's a lot of confusion with it. And so sometimes they can just keep doing more of the same thing. So the thing with perfectionism is usually people engage in some of these behaviors or thought patterns or whatever it is, really because they care, which is a wonderful thing. They care that they're coming across as competent or respectable individuals. They come across as wonderful employees. They really want to do a good job, wonderful students, that kind of thing. And so in many ways, it's a good thing. The thing with perfectionism in the context of how we process it in counseling is you can think of it as good intentions with poor outcomes. And so that would be maladaptive perfectionism. So there's definitely an adaptive type of perfectionism, which is good, which causes someone probably to be a great time manager, or maybe they're very organized, or just kind of something along those lines. But as long as it doesn't have poor outcomes, then it's a strength. So when we delve into perfectionism in counseling, it might look different ways. It could be someone who rigidly follows the rule. And so maybe there's someone who lives by the motto, either do it right or don't do it at all, something kind of like that. Kind of along those lines, it could also be someone who just is absolutely fearful of making any kind of mistake. And so through that, they may actually go to great lengths to hide a mistake, or something like that. Or this might be the type of person who has a real hard time accepting feedback or constructive criticism, that kind of thing. It could also be someone who, we talked about this in another video, who has a hard time kind of prioritizing. So everything feels equally important to them. Everything's in that 100% category. So, kind of being at home and keeping my room clean is equally important to me as being a good wife to my husband, something like that. So if I'm a perfectionist, I might see those things as equally important. Other things might be procrastination. We talked about that one. So this is usually a surprise. Sometimes this is the person who ends up having like a really messy room or a messy office, or hasn't even started on a paper that's due tomorrow, something like that. And typically this comes because the person knows how much energy is required to put into a project. And so they kind of wait for that burst of energy to do it, or they don't do it at all. And then probably another example would be someone who kind of along the lines of fearful of making a mistake and rigidly following the rule, kind of a combination of those. Someone who has to do things repetitively, or so much kind of doing like multiple rough drafts of something that they won't even let anybody see it. So this might be an artist who's working on a beautiful painting but will not let anyone into the room or anything to see it until it's finished. But this also might be the person who's never really satisfied with the finished product. So those are kind of some different examples of perfectionism. And so really kind of in treatment and what we talk about in counseling is not like fully getting rid of perfectionism at all. Or not having it at all. It's really kind of getting it to a point where it's a strength in your life, and it's an adaptive type of perfectionism where you kind of have these appropriately high expectations of yourself with positive outcomes. That's what we're going for. So where it doesn't impact your self-worth and your self-esteem, and it doesn't get in the way of relationships, where you have enough flexibility and balance in your life. Turning in a rough draft is better than not turning in a paper at all. Things like that, allowing our values really to determine our actions. So in that case, for example, me being able to say, wanting to be a good wife to my husband, whatever that means, is a higher value to me than having a clean room. And so allowing that to kind of guide my actions. So those are kind of a few things that we talk about in counseling, and it's different for each person. And so that's what I love so much about the counseling process, is that we can really individualize things for everyone. So those are just a few reminders if it's something that we've talked about or something that you've heard about before. And hopefully that's helpful for you and you get something out of this video.